the most customers and where they can most easily sort of steal things. So I think that that's a good area where you can experiment and try to find cheaper but safe ways to do things. So.
I actually think that this is the most interesting aspect of having begun creating these platforms, that you sometimes find the most surprising uses of it. For example, speaking of micro insurance, we started a little program that every time you get a debit card, you automatically get a micro insurance policy that covers the accidental death of a family member and the repatriation of the body back home. Turns out that was the most important thing that people wanted, which was very surprising to us, and that the very important element that our microfinance partners also said that the first thing that they wanted to expand on was microinsurance as a product, because that's extremely difficult to pay for in any other way. M-Payments is a perfect platform for relatively small payments of financial services. So I do think that this question, I mean, I think that what's interesting about M-Payments, I'm sorry I wasn't able to be at your panel, but from our perspective, at least, it really gives a great deal more visibility in for most types of transaction compared to the current dynamics, and that I know that anti-money laundering, for example, I mean, a lot of and the U.S. has been a really leader in some of the regulatory discussion. We'd like to see more of that discussion being broadened out, because the first reaction to bureaucrats when they start finding out about it, oh, no, that can't be done, right? And then we can spend incredible amounts of time educating bureaucrats to something new. And it could put a very serious crimp on the innovation, which I think is really what's about to explode.
Go ahead, Josh.
Hey everybody. Josh Nesbitt from Frontline SMS Medic and Frontline SMS. And I have to wonder if mobile money is going to bring us a Kiva.org that fits its original narrative, and whether that applies to other groups like Ventana, other peer-to-peer projects. I think that could be really exciting. I want to hear about feasibility.
I love the question. It's really exciting, and to hit on the original narrative piece, you know, Kiva's main selling point was originally that you're enabling a real international person-to-person microloan, such that when I click submit on their gateway, someone is going to be receiving a loan, and that's the person that I've selected on their marketplace. In reality, what was happening was that they were transferring funds to a microfinance institution to its general pool, which were then used as in the normal process. So you weren't actually supporting the individual that you saw in the marketplace. It's very complicated when we get to the actual real-time international person-to-person transfer. The man to my left, and I think Raul, will both be much better suited to answer it. And there's a string of regulatory pieces as well that we should be covering. But I think it's entirely possible. I think it's inevitable. And I think the first group that does it is going to be they're going to be a game changer.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea. This is something that we've talked about quite a bit for NVIA. I mean, a dream scenario for me is literally a Hispanic community in East LA effectively loaning money to Mexican population in their home town. And we've actually spec'd this out where we need to get a little bit further along because we've got a million things to do right now. But what I would like to see happen is effectively you have the same concept of buyer and seller ratings on eBay, but now for cross-border, basically person-to-person micro-lending. And so I can basically post to a Twitter-like feed that I'm looking for $5 or $7 for this, and we know what your payback rate is, and we know what the person on the other side is basically charging, and we marry the two parties together, and then of course we have a mechanism for settling the receipt and the payback in real time, because that's what we do today. And so that actually is the hard part, which we're effectively building first, and then the ability to marry those parties. I think that's a huge opportunity. There's a much larger program today, particularly between the U.S. and Mexico and a lot of states with these 2-for-1 and 3-for-1 programs where states and third-party entities will provide matching funds for grants. But I believe that's not a sustainable system, and I think that this can be a totally sustainable system, which is why I think it has a lot of legs.
Raul, do you want to add to that?
Well, actually, the platform we have right now it can support something like that today. You can actually send a remittance, and then it goes directly into a microfinance account of the individual on the other end. And in fact, we're doing something with the University of California, the students, UC Haiti initiative. We're working with the Central Bank of Haiti to help create the next generation platform of payments of the banks, which include 8 of the regulated microfinance institutions in Haiti, so that you're going to be able to do directly that type of thing. But you know, I still, frankly, and I spoke with the head of Kiva. We talked about this quite a bit. The students, it definitely captures their imagination. They love it. But I think we also need to think about other types of financial products, particularly. We're looking a lot into savings products. That's one of the main things that people are looking at in terms of being able to do something with that. And going beyond the 3-for-1 program, talking with a number of state governors right now and the government of El Salvador, the idea of a ecobono of desarrollo, actually being able to offer savings bonds that are then connected with microfinance institutions, and actually what we're calling mesofinance institutions, not just the micro. You need to have another generation of payment capabilities, and that's going to be the critical issue that I think that could really also make a big push with this technology.
Do we have other questions?
Okay, so when you talk about meso-financial and other forms of creative financing, is there currently, or do you envision a time when there will be a factoring industry in either microfinance or transfer? You're smiling. Is it already happening, or?
Can we take one more question and then we'll
Yeah, on the topic of over-the-horizon applications, I've been waiting to hear some discussion around the interaction of open mapping and mobile in the documentation of property rights, and just wondering if this comes out of conversations that I've been about, you know, sort of mobile phones being many people's first identity, and sort of expanding that to, you know, send text message from the 4 corners of your property and create an international registry of property rights through mobile. So, has that come up? Have you heard of it? Is it feasible?
So Phil, I think I saw somebody smiling in the audience, and I think, Sean, is that some of the work you're doing? Yeah? No? Okay. All right, so what I would say is...
I was going to ask you that same question.
I was going to say it maybe makes sense for you to discuss that with the Frontline SMS family. They're doing a lot of, so Ken Banks of Frontline SMS is here, and then he's created the platform where a lot of verticals, including Ben's company, has built on top of. So I'd recommend, I'm just wondering if I could also make another comment. So alongside that comment, what I would say is, as diplomats in this room, as government officials, and as development agencies, what I would love to see is that this discussion is the beginning of a discussion that is going to be driven further. So it's not just one conference that we're going to have on mobile money, but rather a cross-sector task force is created that includes private enterprise, public, government, NGOs, development agencies, a very, very definitive task force that is objective in nature, that can reach out to their areas, whether it's private sector, public sector, et cetera, to help drive and coordinate some of these efforts without hindering innovation. But if we can get this discussion continued and drive it forward with this task force or something similar to that, I think this would be a very, very much of a success coming out of today's discussion. Sorry, I wanted to give it to anybody else who wants to comment on that.
In terms of the legal framework for that and the processing, I think that's a wide open area. But in terms of using a cell phone, even the best smartphones today, you would never stand up legally as a survey tool. The GPS system is just not accurate enough. Now that may change in 10 years with new GPS standards, but for the most part, if you ever see a survey crew doing that, they're not even using a normal GPS unit. They're using a very expensive one that uses some offsets to get the level of accuracy you need. So unfortunately, that aspect of it won't work. But in terms of the legal framework, I think that is very likely and would work very, very well. So.
I just very quickly on your issue about the potential for new financial instruments that could be emerging from this. I think they're there from a technological point of view, absolutely, and that you can begin to construct them and make them available. The problem is obviously both from the regulatory perspective, the question about who can take a deposit and for what purposes cross-border. You can do them domestically much more directly, but even there's a lot of concern, particularly, again, this discussion about anti-money laundering. Is this, these going to be mechanisms for anti-money laundering? But now, again, I think would be one thing that I would recommend a discussion would be from the U.S.'s perspective, where I think that was a lot of work already done at an earlier stage on this question, and the decision from FinCEN and other folks was that creating this type of a platform with certain limits in terms of the amount of money that we're talking about allowing through a platform is very viable and actually enhances visibility and on some of these critical issues. I don't think that message has really gotten to a lot of the countries that are now just beginning to think about this, and there's a lot of confusion in that area.
That's a great point, thanks.
And just one more thing, coming from PayPal, PayPal launched P2P electronic money transfers back in 1999, 2000, which was at that point the most risky type of transfer ever, because it was electronic, it was with people who you couldn't see the people, you didn't know who you were sending money to. They had 10 years basically of risk modeling to figure out, to flag the risky transactions that were happening. So when the question comes up, what about money laundering, it's absolutely critical to consider this. However, at the same time, it's a tool. Mobile money is a tool. And so similar to in the United States, when we figured out how to make sure to combat this, it shouldn't actually stop the tool from being put out. It's just that we need to figure out how to handle that tool in the best way.
Right. In fact, I would agree completely. I think our goal is to develop services that are better than the next best alternative. And in many contexts, the next best alternative is it's a pretty low bar. So I think we're all going to have to be cognizant of the risks that are inherent in some system like this, but not try and develop something that's absolutely foolproof. So I think maybe we have room for one more question, and then I will let Alana close up the session for us. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. When do you face a lot of who can I have you around and
I think it depends on how the system is built. So PayPal today, you can actually leverage, if you use your email address on any mobile phone, you can actually conduct a PayPal transaction on any phone. But it really depends on how you roll it out, whether it's at the SIM tool card level or if it's done differently. So the technology is there. It's a question of how it's rolled out.
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, and I think one of the a good example is if we're accessing our electronic, our online banking, we're not being authenticated by our IP address. So why should you be authenticated by your phone number? And there's a really interesting model in Cambodia and Wing Money, which leverages USSD. It's unstructured supplementary service data, and it allows you to access your mobile wallet from any phone on any network. So it's complete. You don't have to own a mobile phone to have access to mobile financial services in Cambodia. And the benefit of USSD, as well as being an instant, real-time, encrypted session between a phone and a server, is phenomenal. And there's a lot of promise there, as well as just in general in the virtual SIM toolkits, like Movirtu works in Kenya. I think Comviva has a virtual SIM toolkit. Cameroon, MTN Cameroon. So it's a very interesting space, and I would agree that we should move beyond the phone to fully reach the bottom of the market and move away from, a lot of our metrics are bound by the total cost of ownership of the phone itself, when we can look beyond it.
I would also say that that's going to accelerate dramatically as we see shift more and more to IP-based networks from traditional GSM-based networks, because that makes it just a very transparent transport layer. Just as we can do that from any computer now, I think we're not very far from being able to do that with a lot of advanced applications and authentication on smartphones and increasingly just regular phones too. So.
Yeah, and in many ways, it really comes down to your virtual identity, financial identity, which then can be mobilized in different types of directions. I mean, you can do it through a debit card, you can do it through a phone, you can do it through online, and that's exactly what you want to be able to do, so that it's not specifically connected to any one technology platform. I think that, one of the path dependencies that we have to be careful and to create is if you're doing it directly connected to phones with the chips, obviously, or just with the ways in which, I mean, to be real about it, there are major industries who want to dominate this space, right? And they would prefer to have certain types of path dependencies in place to be able to own the customer, all right? And that's going to be a big battle, right? Is to create your independent virtual identity that you can port to different types of platforms. Did I say something?
No, I'm so sorry. I think we're out of time, but we could spend the rest of the day here picking your brain. So Bill, Ben, Bart, Raul, and Manekshi, I'd just like to say thanks. And to Tech at State, I think you did just a great job. It seems like there's a lot we can do going forward, and whether it's the task force or the next conversation, I don't know. So I'll turn it over to you and just a warm thanks.